lack of support for victims from law enforcement agencies and the unavailability of functional victim support centers in police stations across the country topped the agenda at the inaugural gender-based violence and femicide Indaba in Sandton, Johannesburg. The aim of the Indaba is to lay a foundation for collaborations among GBV activists, communities and the police. Meanwhile, South Africa has seen a spike in child deaths and kidnapping incidents from schools. Civil organizations have called on government and law enforcement to act and protect the rights of the child. To take this discussion further now, let's have more than on this. We have Thabisa Bobo on the line with us. She is from Masimanyane Women's Rights International. Thanks very much for joining us here on the show. Welcome to you.
Thank you so much, Flo.
You know, it's quite unfortunate the fact that, day after day, we're reporting on the number of cases of GBV, and now, this sudden, what seems to be a spike in this trend of missing children, kidnappings and murders. What ways can society prevent these incidents from happening? And interestingly to note, of course, there was this inaugural gender-based violence femicide Indaba in Sandton. How do these Indaba's conferences, conversations help the situation? Because from where I'm sitting, it's actually just getting worse and worse.
First and foremost, we need to acknowledge that we are failing our children. All children deserve the right to be protected, but we're not doing that. It is not happening, and that is evident from the escalating cases of murders and trafficking cases that involve children. We need to ensure that from the moment of birth, children are cared for, supported and protected. And whilst the state has got a constitutional obligation to respect, protect, promote and fulfill all the rights of people, we need a very special focus on children, as they are the most vulnerable people in our society.
Yeah, and let's talk about the lack of support, which formed the sort of core part of this Indaba that was held in Sandton. The lack of support from the authorities, whether we're talking about, from the police, the fact that there's no social services for people who are, in fact, for women who are victims. And then, of course, the delays in the prosecution is also one of the major problems. How do we prevent all of this from happening? And in fact, is it an issue of not having, personnel that are adequately trained to deal with victims of abuse and gender-based violence?
Well, this relates to a number of things, but I'd also like to go back and emphasize the fact that it is the responsibility of parents and both parents, that is, to raise a child. However, it is also the responsibility of families as a whole and communities to take a collective responsibility for keeping the children's safety. And therefore, we need to build safety nets at community level to protect all children. And the state's responsibility is to follow through on all the cases and to bring kidnappers and murderers to book. So we have to rebuild safety nets to ensure social cohesion and community responsibility. The impunity on cases around gender-based violence and child abuse, it has to come to an end. And with the various issues that have been raised and the challenges in terms of law enforcement, that needs to be taken seriously. There has to be employment of law enforcement officers. Again, an issue around resources, because if you look around the country going into the police stations, or rather the service providers, there would always be issues around lack of resources, and that pertains to the people as well as the resources that are needed, the equipment, and therefore budget must be put in place for that, for all of that to happen.
And, one of the things that I wonder is if, we as, the community and as a country are desensitized to, the crimes and what is happening because it happens so much. Just to give you a personal example, recently a friend who's immigrated was saying that, the biggest crime that had taken place where she lives now was a car getting stolen, and that was shocking to the community. But if I'm to ask, a regular South African on the street, what's the big story, the shocking story that's happened, that's taken place, one wouldn't even know where exactly to start. As I stand here on a daily basis, there's always a shocking story. I wouldn't even know where to begin when we're talking about the incidences and what we deal with. So that may be also an issue, that we've come to a point where we're desensitized to what we're experiencing as a country and the level of crime that is perpetuated to women and children.
It's a very sad reality that we have come to as a country to experience. Children are the future, and if you're looking at crime, and if you're talking about child abuse as well as gender-based violence, it seems as if our society has normalized it. And that is why organizations like Masimanyane Women's Rights International exist, so that we bring this into the attention of people, that it cannot be business as usual when we are dealing with this specific type of crimes. And we cannot continue as if this is normal and this is acceptable. And therefore, various efforts need to be are taken in different levels of our society. And that includes at the local level, where I've talked about building a community, or rather safety nets, where people feel safe, as well as also into around strengthening the legislation and also law enforcement, because our South African constitution is a world-renowned constitution. However, people on the ground, they do not feel that we have a world-renowned constitution. Therefore, there must be measures in place that would need to address the gap between what is in the legislation as well as the reality of the people on the ground.
All right, Thabisa, thanks very much for speaking to us. Thabisa Bobo, she is the Prevention Program Coordinator of Masimanyane Women's Rights International.